Yes. Are those the ones that, no, those are Garanimals. Well, it's almost all farmers that work in the factory at night, the night shifts.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome, Chief Dolph.
Thank you.
And we are discussing Article, like I said, 38B1, Fire Rescue, the Class A pumper. It is on page 16 in the warrant. Chief.
Correct. First, I'd like to thank the subcommittee, the interest that they took in this, a couple visits to the station, going over the apparatus I want replaced, making them understand the uses of the apparatus, and seeing just how much damage and what it would cost us to fix the truck that I want to replace. I want to especially thank Bob Ranzavino for putting together this nice trifold that has just about all the information you could ask for, and I guess at this time I'll just entertain questions from the committees, both committees, to do with this truck if they had not answered already on this trifold.
Well, let's just give a quick high level. You've got an apparatus, a unit that you want to replace because it's rusting primarily. The center beam support is in trouble, and there's other undercarriage rust. Is that correct?
It's almost a twofold problem. The frontline piece that I want to put into reserve is the PS Arrow XT, and currently it's engine 2, it's called. That has 187,000 miles on it. When you actually do the conversion factor for engine hours to road miles, we're up over approximately 338,000. I did that calculation before for the finance subcommittee. So that would go into reserve. That truck's still a good truck. It's going to be a great reserve piece. It's NFPA compliant with all current standards.
Is that the unit that's down at Station 2 right now?
Correct. That's the one you went down.
There's the other one that was the sister sitting right next to the Pierce we were looking at.
Correct, yeah. They were able to view both engines at the same time, the one we wanted to put in reserve and also the one we want to replace.
Good.
The one we want to replace is a 2001 Pierce. That is actually the truck we bought to be a reserve truck from Sharon. I believe it was 5 years ago for $50,000. Might be a little longer than that. The major issue with that, we have severe frame rot. We estimated $40,000 just to get the frame rails replaced, but to do that, you have to send the truck back to the factory, which means it would go back out to Wisconsin. And we all know, if anyone's had any experience with fixing anything mechanical, especially a truck with that much frame rot on it, they have to remove the body to obviously replace the frame. So we feel as though that $40,000 in repairs is very much on the low side once they get into taking this apart. And the truck also, it's underpowered, has a small transmission. It's not a typical engine that I would order for use, the heavy use that Stoughton puts on a truck. So that's a truck I would like to trade in. There is a trade-in value. It's anywhere from, typically it's about $5,000 for an ambulance. For an engine like this, it's going anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 with this amount of work that's required to it.
And this was the unit that we purchased from Sharon?
Sharon, correct.
What was it, 5 years ago? For like 45,000 or something of that nature? So it was a
50,000,
bargain.
yeah.
50,000. It was a bargain at the time and has served us well, so that's good news.
Absolutely. We got our money's worth out of it.
Yep, okay. Barbara, did you have any thoughts? Bob, turn on your mic. Thank you, Pat.
Oh, my mic, sorry. I always forget that, sorry. So I have all the repairs. A lot of these repairs are just minor, though. I mean, it looks like a huge stack, and how could that engine ever work? But a lot of this is just lights and stuff like that. So, but it is, I think you told me it cost $25,000 since July to fix the 2007. I think that was the number you gave me.
On which,
Repairs.
are you talking on the
So 2007.
2007?
Yeah.
Yes, we had steering box went, we had a radiator work that had to be done, some other cooling issues, and we had to replace leaf springs. It was a
So-
tough winter on the trucks.
So the idea was that we're not going to get this fire engine for 18 months to 2 years, so you wanted to get the engine going before the 2007 becomes a major issue. So
Right, that's another.
kind of like what we were saying.
That's another great point. It's not like buying a car. You just can't show up at a dealership and, okay, I'll take that one right there. Going through the bid process, putting a spec together, the whole process, just before it even goes out to bid, is going to be approximately, best case scenario, about 60 days. Then it goes out to bid. Then we go through the procurement process, and by the time we get a signed contract, you're probably looking 90 to 120 days. And then they have to go and build it, which you're looking to approximately 12 months. You can actually put in a contract, Mrs. Anzavino asked me this question, you can actually put into a contract if you're looking at the budget and when you're gonna borrow and when you want to have the treasurer go out to bond on it. You can tell them when you want to take delivery on it, if you need that extra month to get it into another fiscal time quarter.
Okay.
And the subcommittee voted unanimously to support this article.
All right. She really was against it, too.
Really, seriously.
I kind of got that vibe at our first meeting.
Now, the 99, it's in Station 1, 1999 vehicle
99 right now is at
that has
station...
the wood number 3 on the front of the grill.
Actually, that is, typically it's there. Right now, we have it down at Station 2 because the tank straps broke, rotted through, and it also, as a result, it's while we were using the truck, so it dropped the tank, so we have to replace the tank and the straps.
Okay.
I'm going to blame the Public Works Department because of the calcium chloride and the magnesium chloride that they put on the roads.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
This engine's going to fit in both stations, right?
Absolutely.
Mr. Guerin.
Chief, it appears that you've selected a Pierce truck. Is that correct?
I would like to stick with what we already have, but we have to go through the procurement process and the bid process. We're very happy with that Pierce. The particular models, I should say, the last three Pierces we got, we went with this particular Arrow XT model. Why? It's the largest frame rails that are on the market. The interior is all metal finish. There's no plastic, there's no materials, there's nothing that's gonna break or crack or loosen up. They're just a well-made truck. Also, they can, because of the large frame rails, we're able to put in the larger transmission, the EV, I don't know how much you know about transmission, but it's an EV4000, which is the largest transmission on the market for this particular, for an automatic transmission for this type of vehicle. And also, we like to go with the Detroit diesel. We go with the 60 series, which is the larger Detroit diesel. They seem to last better for our type of use.
So this is a first-rate vehicle. I'll talk about reliability only because that's a word that's come into my head. Is this rated reliable as opposed to other trucks?
I can only compare it with my experiences in the fire service. I feel as though they make a better, tighter, better-made vehicle than, let's say, Emergency One or KME. I like the independent front suspension that Pierce has. One of the reasons I like it's called TAC4 front suspension. The reason I like that particular suspension is because the brakes that go along with it, our brakes last longer, our tires last longer. We end up getting like 20,000 more miles out of the tires, It's amazing that independent front suspension that they happen to feature that nobody else does, what it does for the rest of the vehicle as far as it.
These straps that just rotted out on the other vehicle, I'm surprised that they didn't use stainless steel on those things. Is this a different material on these trucks here?
Everyone's gone to stainless steel now because it's a very common, anyone in the trucking industry will know that all the new chemicals that they're using on the roads is just raising Cain with the trucks.
Well, that's why I was surprised that it rotted through. I would have thought that stainless steel was the material of choice in this for a long, long time. They haven't just started using salt in the last couple of years.
In '99, it's more the magnesium chlorides that are really raising Cain with everything, but there weren't stainless steel straps on that 1999. There was a service bulletin issued on it. I looked it up in the history looking at it, because when the tank dropped, I said, geez, I remember a service bulletin on that, and it ended up being like 12 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, stainless steel is the straps of choice now, but it wasn't back then.
Mr. Murphy?
The last couple of fire trucks that we've purchased, we've been giving grants to pay for the trucks. Is there any grant going to help pay for this?
We currently don't meet the criteria of the grant for that particular model fire truck. The certain age of the trucks, it's got to do with the size of the municipality. We've only received the grant for one, and that was the replacement of the ladder truck.
Okay. And the truck you're going to trade that in, is there anything that's on that that's worth hanging on to?
Oh, don't worry, we'll,
Pick it clean, all right.
typically with trucks, we pick it clean, because all the tools on it are reusable. It's not like we have antique tools on a truck. I mean, because this truck goes into service. They get into a truck, and for some reason, if a truck drops a tank, we still gotta go to the call. And they're switching over everything right away. The truck's set up and ready to go with the particular tools.
Thank you.
Chief, does it make any sense to repair this vehicle and leave it as a backup somewhere? I mean, 40 grand seems to be short money to have a fully serviceable unit ready to go if you need it. It's a thought. I don't think we really talked about that in depth, but
On a truck of this age, and once you look at all the rot on it, I think 40,000 is a very conservative number.
do you think it's going to be a lot more to
And-
fix that?
Something we purchased for 50,000, it's still a 2001, it's underpowered, it's actually got the
Oh, no, I know all
40
your,
series.
I know all your issues with
Yeah.
it. But if it was repairable, I thought you could have it as a backup to a backup, but, because it seemed like short money. But if it's going to be more than 40, and I understand it's underpowered and that, there are other performance issues that you have with it in terms of being on par with a frontline vehicle, but when you need a backup, you need a backup, so just a thought. Dr. Camacho.
Yes, through you to the chief. Is there, because of the expense of the vehicle, 550,000, is there any type of an incentive built in by the companies that produce these vehicles that will come back to the town or to the fire department in the town if, in fact, they purchase a vehicle from that particular company?
Incentive, but it almost sounds like, in a layman's term, a kickback, and I think that's against the law.
Well, I didn't say that. I said any
No, I know,
incentive-
I'm just using another terminology for the word incentive.
Well, you
I've never heard of any. I am exploring the possibility of the town being able to get on this purchasing group out of Galveston, Texas, I believe it is, and you can use it nationwide, and they have some specs drawn up, and actually one of the trucks that I'm interested in is on that spec to do with a lower purchase price than I currently believe it will be. But would have to join as a town. I think it's a $300 fee, and I have to talk about that with our procurement officer to see if that would benefit us.
I was just wondering about that because they are expensive vehicles, and the one company might want to incentivize as opposed to another company, and there may be whatever. I didn't know that.
No, yeah, I'm not aware of any type of
Thank you.
program.
So in other words, if we vote $550,000, we're going to see that $550,000 went to that particular company?
Correct.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Nothing on Craigslist, right? Mr. Trunfield? I'm asking in lieu of Mr. DeFelice showing up and asking.
Yeah,
for it.
just curious, Chief. The ambulance was, you can save the box or switch it around or whatever you mentioned. Is anything like that with fire trucks? Are they so unique, like you can buy a chassis later, keep the body sort of thing, or?
That seems to be done more with tankers than it is with fire apparatus because of the intricacies of the pump and the piping and everything else involved. You know, I am not aware of someone that's done that. I have known it to be done with tankers, because a lot of times with tankers, they'll use a commercial chassis, you know, lightweight fiberglass chassis instead of a custom-made chassis that actually holds up after an accident. You see a lot more of that with tankers in rural situations. They'll just keep swapping a tank over to a new chassis.
All set? Moving on. Article 38B2, fire rescue EMS upgrades.
That particular item is needed for 3 defibrillators, which are just over 15 years old, and the company will no longer support them. Just to let you know, those defibrillators also do capnography, they do cardioversion. They're quite a tool that's in the ambulance, and every year they have to come out and reprogram them with software updates, and they're no longer going to support them. There is a small trade-in value to them, but they're approximately $25,000 a piece.
Okay.
And the shelf life is right around 15 years.
Questions from anybody? Joe?
There would be no training coming along. I mean, they basically do the same job, right?
Correct, but we always do get training with the
But
purchase.
that's inclusive,
new
no
defibrillators.
more money, that's inclusive.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Murphy?
You say this is because the equipment is being outdated, no longer supported and all that. My question is, in your department budget, as a matter of fact, all department budgets, should there be money allocated for upgrades and, you know, basically it's almost like a long-range maintenance plan. In other words, if your department was to put aside $10,000 per year, you know, after a period of time, you'd anticipate this happening to be replaced or other articles to be replaced.
Sorry.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay, it's not like a household budget where you, okay. Right.
But it's a good point, Peter, because as part of our capital planning process, these things can be built in. This certainly qualifies for the criteria of a capital. It's more than $5,000, has more of a useful life of more than 3 years. So it would qualify and should be built into, you know, an overall capital plan. I know this is the 3 to 5 year that's currently, you know, the model that we're trying to work on, but, you know, it does need to kick out farther, particularly with our building needs and things of that nature these days. So it's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Mrs. Anzavino?
I just want to say that our subcommittee voted unanimously to approve this article too.
Other questions? Moving on to Article 38B3, Fire and Rescue, and this is for gear storage lockers, $10,000.
These are the gear storage lockers that are down on the apparatus bay floor. These are not the ones that, you know, up where their personal possessions are. And some,
Up in the
although
residence?
some of their stuff is personal possessions.
I saw some of the personal possessions.
Typically, what I want to do is buy these and have them mounted at the station too. Obviously, I wouldn't, right now, currently, we have these portable ones that are, really don't hold up. They're starting to fall apart is what it basically boils down to. And I want to get just outfit Station 2 with them, because we know Station 2 is going to be with us a long time. I'll continue trying to make repairs and make sure the lightweight ones that are currently in use at Station 1 are going to stay there, but I want to replace the ones at Station 2 with just a better product is what it boils down to.
Okay. Any questions from anybody? Don't see any. Moving on. Article 38B4, Fire and Rescue. This is expand Station 2 parking lot, $10,000.
Once again, I know this has appeared before you, I want to say 3 or 4 years. Station 2, we host a lot of trainings. Parking is at a premium. We're actually hosting the Munis training for 3 months at this time. I'm also hosting trainings for a citizen group called Citizens Emergency Response Team. We're doing our basic trainings, and parking's at a premium. We have that area out front that I guess you'd call it kind of a lawn, but it's more muddy than anything else, and I just want to replace that with some type of material to make it a parking area. I got the price of $10,000 after conversations with John Batch, probably a year ago now, and along with his help, he felt as though 10 was a fair price to take care of that. And also I've had some conversations with engineering about it, so we've talked about what we would have to do for drainage or what type of material we'd have to use to make it conform.
Okay. Questions? I'm sorry, Jim, and then Roberta.
Chief, how many spaces will this provide for? Do you have any idea?
I think we measured it out to get 11.
And how many square feet is the area?
I don't have
Well, it's 60 by 10 or something.
I don't have the drawing. I think it's roughly 100
feet.
100 feet long from just one side of where the hydrant is to where we have the flagpole, and a little bench there. I think it's 100 feet we measured out.
By 10 feet, okay. 1,000 square feet. Thank you.
Dr. Camacho, and then Joe?
Yes, please, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the, excuse me. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the fire chief. The parking lot at Station 2, is there an order on that, a conservation order on that land?
For the overall piece of property, there was at one time when we did the construction. I'm not aware of.
Because of the water that's there? So my question would be, if you are able, in fact, to expand the parking space because of the order of conditions that was originally placed on the property, unless for some reason that has been rescinded. I don't know if it has been. But the other thing would be, if it's there, I wonder if you can put an impervious surface on there.
That came up in conversation with the engineer, the town engineer, so
Yeah.
that might be an option.
Because the water was a problem. I think the order of conditions probably is still there, unless it has been rescinded for some particular reason. So that would be, I don't know if it ever said anything about expanding or not expanding a parking area or an area that would be covered by a surface that would be not permeable by water. I don't know, but I think it's something to look into. Because
Well,
you don't want
obviously,
to
we'd
get
have to meet-
tangled up with the DEP. I mean, the engineering department is where I think I would start first. Have you done that?
I did meet with the engineer, and he did mention the impervious surface.
Did they mention any order of conditions?
He did not.
Well, maybe you ought to go back and ask them if there is one. Thank you. That's all I have.
Joe?
I've seen cars parked out there. It's not upsetting the traffic onto Central Street, right? I mean, there'll be no, it's a good place to put a parking lot.
I feel as though it is too. We're always hurting for parking spaces.
And I do, like I say, I go by the station just about every day, and I do see cars parked there, and I don't see that it would be a problem. It would be better with the small, paved parking lot than what's...
And I would rather, actually, one of my ideas would have my day staff park out there, so we make sure we have more spots open for the customers that come in on a daily basis for plan reviews, permits, because parking is always at a premium.
I think it's a good idea. I think somebody, should get together with you, or you get together with them when it goes on to the town floor to explain. I was there when you approached the town last year with this, and I was really surprised that, that they voted that down. It just didn't make sense to me. But, and there's no reason not to allow that. So somebody should get together and come up with a better presentation to the town meeting members. Thank you.
Barbara?
The subcommittee voted to support this, too.
Okay. I think that's the end of all the public, of all the articles that we're hearing tonight for the public hearing. And I think municipal operations, Peter, if you had any other questions, or?
But they've got a
Yeah. I think you're all set now, so.
I make a motion that the municipal operations adjourns. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, municipal operations. Okay, we're going into the budget, Article 9. We're at Public Safety, page 25. And this is Fire and Rescue. It's actually pages 25, 6, and 7. Chief, did you want to give the highlights? And then we can have a report from the subcommittee.
Majority of the changes that you see are contractual in nature, and how the signing of the contract would affect some of the line items, percentage-wise, with the increases. The only large increase you'll see is $50,000 for, I want to use, it's actually $50,000 in overtime just for a fire inspector to help catch up on the current, I don't have my lines numbered. Let me grab my other sheet.
About 2/3 of the way down.
Sorry. But anyways, what that position, what I wanted to do, originally I went for a new lieutenant's position in fire prevention. After discussions with the town manager, he decided that we should go forward with $50,000 to be used just to bring someone in to help do inspections, to catch up. The issue is we have fallen behind on inspections due to the large number of inspections we have to do. Some are mandated by the state, some are mandated by Department of Public Health. We have a lot of group homes in town now, and a lot of them have to have quarterlies. So as we expand the amount of inspections that we have to do, also we have to inspect every single house that is sold in town. That's expanded upon what we have to do as far as inspections. So I wanted to get one lieutenant, and once again, the town manager suggested that we go for $50,000. That's the largest increase. All the rest are small increases. You will see in a previous budget, fiscal year 15 budget, we had $208,577 has been removed, paramedic stipends, due to the last contract that has now worked into their base and into their grid system.
Yep.
That was done by HR.
The overall increase is at 3.6%. Is that right, Bob?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
I guess I just entertain any questions at this time on the overall budget.
Actually, Barbara, if you're subcommittee, you want to just speak about the highlights, and then Bruce, you're next.
We went over this budget pretty carefully, and the only thing that we saw was what he just told you about, and then he can explain to you, there's something with the EMTs, I have it in my notes, something about the doctor, you have to work under the doctor, so you said that fee was changing, that he was doing it for free, and now he's not doing it for free anymore.
No, my concern, it's a couple of years in a row.
Yeah.
you've seen I've returned that money. I haven't spent it because at one time we had a doctor, it's called a medical director. All our paramedics work under a doctor's license. We have to by state regulations. And we had a doctor that was charging us $10,000 a year, which is pretty close to, pretty much the going rate for a lot of emergency room doctors. We happened to get connected with a doctor out of the Brockton Hospital emergency room who doesn't charge a fee, which is fantastic for us. But my concern is that that could change at any time. You know, it has changed, I know, for some fire departments that work out of the Norwood Hospital. They had a doctor that was doing it for no fee for quite some time, and all of a sudden they're all getting hit with a $15,000 bill to have a medical director. So my concern is why I want to, if you look back in the budget, you'll see that we haven't spent it, but I want to keep that in there so I don't get surprised by anything. It's $10,000 for a medical director.
And we had one other question that came up last night about community events. Do you have money in your budget for community events?
No, I typically, I absorb that within my budget. Any community events that require overtime staff. If I can with the staffing on duty, I send them, but some events you cannot do with your on-duty staff.
Okay,
You
so
just
other
don't
than
have
that,
the
you-
manpower.
Okay, I didn't think you had a separate thing in there, but I needed to ask you. Okay, thanks.
Just very quickly, the medical director, what do they do for you, chief?
Everyone has to, well, they hold continuing education units called M&M rounds. They typically hold 12 a year. They hold different trainings throughout the year. And what they do is they require that our paramedics have to attend a minimum of 5 a year. And if they don't maintain that 5 a year, then they no longer can practice under that doctor's license. If they don't have a license to practice, then they're no longer employed at the Stoughton Fire Department because they need a license to practice. All paramedics have to operate under that doctor's license, so he has to check them off. He takes responsibility for them. He's the one that calls them in if there's been a mistake on a medication and it's resulted in bad treatment or outside of the protocol, the state protocols and regional protocols of treatment. So it's a check and balances, and basically they practice under his license.
Okay. Mr. Delinsky?
The firefighters line, was your original submission to the budget committee just a typo? Like, it went from $2,074,000 to $2,707,000, and then they knocked it down to $2,200,000.
No, I went for 8 new positions to bring us in line with the study that was done in 1997.
And the town manager backed that up.
Okay, and the $2,203,000 represents a 6.2% raise.
That's partly because we got rid of the line from the paramedics.
Okay, so
stipends.
that's absorbed with...
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Guerin?
Chief, I'm looking at that inspections line with the $50,000 that new. You mentioned that this was going to be an overtime budget item.
It would have to be, yeah.
And it was going to be a lieutenant. I'm looking at the lieutenant's salary line up here is 10 at $720,000. That's an average of $72,000 each. At time and a half, that'd be 108. That $50,000 is going to get you something less than 1,000 hours of inspection.
I'll answer that question, Jim, because that's my line item. It does not have to be a lieutenant. Any firefighter who's been trained can do the inspections. Our average firefighter works 6.7 days a month, so they're available to come in on overtime and do these inspections without adding a position.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Pat?
Overtime. We had combined all the overtime line items into one number last year, and it looks like they're broken back out again. Can you just give me a little information on why that happened? For example, the second ambulance minimum manning was part of overtime. All the various overtimes were consolidated into one number last year, and they're not any longer.
Tracking purposes.
That was just a real disappointment, because the reason we did that is so that we could get a handle on what the true cost of overtime in this department is. And it got blown back out, so now we don't really know. We don't have a true number any longer of what the total cost of overtime in fire is.
Well, we can go down on which ones are overtime and...
Could you break that out, Chief, and submit it to the subcommittee?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions out there. Are we all set on this budget? Moving on. Thank you, Chief.
Oh, thank you.
We are looking at the regional school budgets, page 56.
Is the handout Jamie gave us last night?
Good evening. Thank you for having
Good
us.
evening. Welcome, Mr. Lopes. How are you tonight?
No, Mark Morris, School Business Manager. So
Oh,
Superintendent
sorry.
was not able to
Business
make it,
manager. We didn't get Mr. Lopes. And Mrs. Zoll.
Yes, and Mrs. Old, the representative from Stoughton on the Southeastern Regional School Committee.
Welcome. Okay. Did you want to talk about your budget?
Sure. I'm presuming everyone received the handouts?
Yes, we did. Matter of fact, we got a packet with 7 or 18 copies, and they've been distributed, so thank you very much for that.
So I'd like to start right on the very first page there and just highlight a couple of key areas. The very first thing is I'd like to recognize that Southeastern in this past year was recognized as a level 1 school. So that's something that the staff, administration, students, everyone's worked very hard to get to that point. So I would like to recognize that. As well as our enrollment has increased over 4.4% over the last year, and as well as 14% with our low-income students as well for FY16. And you'll see that even with those increases, Southeastern for the 7th straight year is still at the minimum net school spending requirements that's required by the state for Southeastern to operate for their school year. So on March 10th, the school committee voted FY16 budget of $24,573,257. And for Stoughton, that's an assessment of $1,433,105 based on 137 students. And I'll get into more detail as we go along. One thing the district was, I guess, surprised with this past year is the state retirement system actually sent a letter to Southeastern Regional advising us that, I guess through an audit they've had, they've realized that they've never billed Southeastern Regional for the last 40 years for state retirement. As you're aware,
They didn't bill for what? I'm sorry?
state retirement. So we have
For
employees
retirement.
that are on state retirement, not on the Mass Teachers Retirement System. So any employee that's not contracted or has a contract or a license with the state through the Teachers Retirement System is on state retirement. And the Mass Teachers Retirement is actually funded at 100% contribution by the employee. And that's how the state retirement had been up until this past year. Now they're telling us that it's different, and that they'd like us to go back to FY13 and make those payments, make good to them for that time. We've explained to them that we don't have that in our FY15 budget. That wasn't budgeted. We can't use current year funds for past year expenses. So we do have an attorney that we've hired. It includes over 12 regions, so that's over 287 communities in the Commonwealth that this affects. So what we're trying to ask the state retirement board to do is to take a look and waive up until FY15 and let us start budgeting now when we're preparing our FY16 budget for this bill that we have. And I'll get into more detail as we go along how we've handled that in our budget. But just so you know, that's something that was brought upon us this past year by the state.
Okay.
So the very next page, if you turn the page, shows our FY16 budget. You'll see that our foundation budget is $22,565,360. The very next line is that state retirement obligation that we just mentioned. So what the school committee has voted to do is take $265,855 from our operating budget, and the other half, the other $265,855 from our excess and deficiency account to cover that cost for FY16. So you can see that the school committee did not vote to assess the community anything additional for that amount. They're actually voted to take that out of our general budget and our excess and deficiency account. The Chapter 70 aid was $14,265,952, with local assessments at $8,299,408. The next section is our transportation. I know I mention this every year. Regional transportation is to be funded at 100% by the state. The state's never funded it at 100% since inception. So anytime you do get to speak to your senators, congressmen, representatives, and let them know that regional transportation is very important to the towns and the communities, because if it does get funded at 100%, there's no additional cost to the communities. But until the state does that, the additional cost is always passed on to the communities based on enrollment. So what you can see, though, is our transportation budget this year is actually 17.1% less than last year for a combination of two reasons. Last year's regional transportation amount was the highest we've seen in any year at just shy of 80%. And we did cut back on some of the transportation costs that we've had by combining some busing routes and combining some positions in that department. So overall, we were able to reduce regional transportation to the communities by 17.1% for FY16. In that last section, you'll see other expenditures. The $436,175, that's the payment that the school has to the, for the MSBA bond, which is for our renovation expansion project that actually ended roughly a year ago now. So our payment on our bond is $436,175, with $244,175 coming from E&D and $192,000 coming from local assessments. So as we promised, we have not increased that amount. That's been the same for the last 15 years, and the school has taken on the rest on their own to make that payment.
Okay.
That gives you the budget of $24,573,257. And if you turn the page quickly, the next page there, you'll see that Stoughton has an increase of 1 student for FY16. So it went from 136 to 137 students, and that amount represents 9.7% of the total student enrollment at Southeastern Regional. On the next page.
Wait a minute, the percent increase, because you had negative growth in East Bridgewater and Norton.
Correct.
If one student represents 10% increase.
No, not 10%, it represents 9.7% of the total enrollment, the 137 students do.
And what's the 9.7% for?
The 137 students represent 9.7%.
Oh, okay, that share, I got you, okay. So,
the increase is 0.7, the next column, the percentage change.
yep, see it.
So one student represents that 0.7, from 136 to 137.
Thanks for clarifying that.
No problem. So on the next page there, you'd see that our budget for FY16 is up 6.4%.
Distributed them the other night.
Did you need another copy? I have additional copies here.
Do you have an extra copy?
I do.
We made a change last year. It never occurred to me that they would undo it.
So on the next page, you can see that the Southeastern Regional School budget is up 6.4% for FY16. I've actually taken it one step further below. If we were to take out the new state retirement contribution that we were never aware of that just came upon us, we'd actually be at 3.8% increase. And our enrollment is 4.4, so we'd actually be below our enrollment increase if it wasn't due to the state retirement contribution. I guess the important page comes next when you say, well, what does it mean for Stoughton? If you look at the bottom half of that section, Stoughton's FY16 assessment is $1,433,105, and that's up $6,339 from FY15. The next few pages are just some demographic or some financial information for the different towns and communities. So if you go to Stoughton's, which is about 6 or 7 pages back, it will show the increase of assessment is 0.4%, while the increase in enrollment is 0.7%. And in the bottom half of that chart, you'll see the factors that play a key factor in the assessment costs. Those are some of the key areas. I can go into more detail in anything that you like or any questions you have.
Questions from the committee or the public? Committees first. Pat?
Hi, I meant to send an email, I'm sorry, I didn't ever got to do it, but how do you verify that the 137 students you're billing us for truly are Stoughton residents?
That's through guidance. I don't know the exact process, but I could put you in touch with guidance, or if you want to send me an email, I can forward it to the guidance department.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Ansavino?
So I know I asked this another year, and not every kid who applies to your school gets in.
Correct.
And our town always feels like we're supporting kind of like Brockton because the way the formula works, we get assessed a little bit higher. I was wondering, do you know what the percentages, you probably do, the percentages that each town gets in versus the number of kids that apply?
That I don't know. I can tell you how many students represent Stoughton based on the enrollment factor.
Right.
But I don't know, so you're probably asking how many are on the waiting list from Stoughton.
Something like that, because we always kind of feel like we're supporting Brockton, and I was just curious, do they get in more than we do? I mean, they obviously have more enrolled in there, but is it a higher percentage of the kids that apply? Are you favoring them over our kids? That's all I'm
What I can say about the enrollment, it doesn't favor any community because it's a blind enrollment process. So when the students apply, they take discipline issues, grades, attendance records, when they grade them, and how they're going to be approved into or accepted to Southeastern Regional. So before we even know what community they're from, they're either approved or denied.
Okay, so you have no idea where they're
It's a
coming
blind
from.
admission process, correct?
Okay, that makes me feel a little better, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Mrs. Zoll? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Tronfield.
Yeah, I just curious, that 600,000 pension, is that a permanent 600,000 every year, or is that a one-shot catch-up provision?
No, actually, the 600,000 is just for 1 year, for FY13. So we're basing it on that amount, because we don't get billed until the prior February for the current year, so we won't know what it is. They base it on the amount that's been paid out and the amount that the retirees are receiving. So there's no fixed amount, and that will probably go up as time goes on, as more people retire.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, do you have any kind of a fund balance that has any money in it, that sort of thing, that could pay for that, or?
Our excess and deficiency account, where you see we're taking half of that from.
You're putting it in there? Okay,
We're taking half, the 285, the 265, 855, coming from our excess and deficiency account.
okay. And your average pay bump on your grid for the teachers, do you know what an average bump is per year on a percentage basis?
Right, the last contract was at 1% cost of living.
No, the average grid for like, year one, year two, if you're here.
Well, that, I don't know, it's roughly in the 2 to 3% range.
2 to 3% range, okay. And do you know anything about the current year with the school bus, the transportation issue with the governor cutting anything? Do you know anything about that?
We know there were 9 seat cuts made by Governor Deval Patrick prior to him leaving. We know that Governor Baker, as he's come in, has spoke to the different school regions saying that he will not make any additional 9 seat cuts, but he also did not reinstate the money that the governor cut, the $18 million in regional.
So when are you gonna know if you're gonna have to ask for more, if that gets cut? How's that gonna work?
Again, as you recall, 2 years ago, Governor Patrick made some cuts right up until June 30th, or very close to June 30th. The school committee voted not to assess the communities any additional money, but we won't know until the House and Ways have finalized their budget.
Thank you.
The Regional School Association has filed a suit saying that if you don't cut local aid, you should not be cutting local, regional transportation. That they're the same as an education cut.
Yeah, well, they get 58% of their budget comes from Chapter 70 money. Dr. Camacho, and then Joe? Oh.
Through you to the people that are presenting to us, when you look at the enrollments for Brockton, 866, Are the enrollment figures based on population?
Based on the October 1st numbers, they're based on how many students from Brockton are enrolled.
I don't, you have to clarify that.
Our total enrollment is,
So is it a percentage of enrollment within the school system, the town, the city or town, that determines how many students will be accepted from that city or town?
it's not, no.
Then how does it work?
Again, it's a blind enrollment process. It's a blind enrollment process, so when the students apply, again, they look at grades, discipline issues, attendance records, and they score those, they score various criteria based on the student, not based on the community they come from or the shop they're looking to get into. So the enrollment process is totally blind.
They set a score every year, that's a cutoff, and they accept everybody above that score. And then if there's still openings, then they lower the score, but it's strictly by a numerical score.
Why do they come to the schools and interview the children then?
I'm sorry, say that again?
They come to the schools and interview the children.
They don't interview the children. They try to explain to them what Southeastern offers and what's available to them. They're not interviewing them. They're letting them know. It's kind of like an open house that comes to the student. So they'll let the student know what's available at Southeastern, the different shops we offer, and the different career paths we have. So they're not taking interviews. They just give them some information to the students.
Well, I remember when I was a teacher in the Stoughton Public Schools that individual students that had applied went and were interviewed by someone that came from Southeastern Regional. So that's why I'm asking, how can this really be a blind enrollment process?
How long ago was that? I'm not sure.
100 years ago.
Yeah, so I can't speak to that because the process now is a blind enrollment process.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And just to refresh everybody's memory, Robin Zoll is the Stoughton designee on the school committee for Southeast Regional and represents our town, and every town, I think every town has one representative, is that right? Yeah.
The city of Brockton has two due to the number of
Number of people, right. Any thoughts or feedback for us, or?
Well, I've now been on the school committee for a year, so I've learned a lot. I've gone to several conferences. I'm amazed how well the kids are doing at Southeastern. I mean, we had students we have some students, I mean, 60% of our kids are on free and reduced lunch, yet we're getting kids into nursing programs, and these kids are so poor they didn't even have a chance to visit the schools before they went up and before they were accepted.
Yep.
I mean, these kids are doing so well, and they're coming from very underprivileged backgrounds. They're getting into colleges, they're getting good jobs, and it's exciting. It really is exciting to see what's going on.
Is this the first year's level one, or is it successive years, or?
This is the
First year.
First year. Congratulations,
Yeah.
by the way. It's an awesome achievement. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here and presenting, and for all the information that you do supply to us.
And I do invite anyone from the committee, if you ever have a chance to stop by, come by and take a look at what the kids do and see what is involved at Southeastern.
I really, really would love to do that. I was this close this year, making it to your public hearings, so.
Please
Come
take
by
advantage.
come back by next Tuesday night. They have dinners that the culinary students and the
On
technical
Tuesday nights?
students-
Tuesday night,
Tuesday nights, 5:30 to
7:30.
7:30. It's
Okay.
the last week of that because they're
Oh.
going out on internships, but food is very good.
We'll take that under advisement. We can't be bought, but that'd be a great incentive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Moving on to Stoughton Public School budgets. It says page 57, but I don't believe that. 56. This 56 is the regional schools, isn't it? I don't, well, 50, no. No, but I do have page 1. Yep. So page 1, the school budget is submitted at $43,040,735. Welcome, Dr. Rizzi.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. Good evening.
Take a moment to get set up while we get organized.
Okay. Having worked with this budget now since September, I'm prepared. In case I'm sure all the members of the committee have it, I brought a few extra copies of the budget and the executive summary for anyone who had not already received that. It is not new material, but I just brought some paper copies.
Okay. Do you want to give us the highlights, and then we can have the subcommittee weigh in, and then we can open up the questions?
Yes, absolutely. Our budget process, as you know, begins in the summertime, involves numerous hearings with various school personnel, numerous hearings with each principal, department head, director, multiple times. We do our very best to cut down to what we believe is absolutely essential, and in this year, we have done that as well. We look at the plans that we have, our 3-year school improvement plan, district improvement plan, and our school improvement plans when we set our priorities. The priorities for this year, given our analysis of our scores and the various areas which we have to address, we always have to look at what mandates are new, how we are going in the implementation of our mandates. We are far ahead of most other districts in the implementation of curriculum. We are far ahead of most districts in terms of our technology, and a lot of the debt for that goes to Dr. Gray, who, as most of you know, was here for many years and built an infrastructure for us. We are far ahead in a lot of areas, and we're very proud of our 4 level 1 schools this year. We have identified through an analysis of our scores that the area we need to focus on at this particular point with the most attention is in the area of math. And in the last few years, we have come to you asking for numerous positions, I would say an average of about 12 positions a year since 2011 or 12. And that was because we were in the process of restoring the many programs and parts of our school system that we had lost in the downturn. I'm happy to say that we have essentially done that at this point. So the only 3 positions we are asking for in this budget are 3 math support teachers, 1 for the elementary, 1 for the middle school, and 1 for the high school level. We would like to be able to say next year that the success that we can see in English language arts, which has led to very improved scores, we can echo as well in mathematics. And those positions are geared particularly to address that. The next generation science standards are coming online for next year, and so there is an additional approximately $50,000 in the STEM curriculum line to address the purchase of materials and training for the new curriculum standards, science standards implementation. But you will notice that there are fewer new positions in this budget than we have had to ask for in the previous few years. And I anticipate as we go into FY17, it's a little early and premature, but that will even probably be more the case. I do not anticipate that we would be looking to increase the number of positions in the FY17 budget. So each year is a set of different circumstances, and at this point, I think we have successfully completed our rebuilding process. We'd like to address this particular issue in mathematics, but for the most part, those are the highlights of the budget as constructed this year.
Mrs. Colburn, Chair of the Subcommittee on Schools. education?
And if I might, while Mrs. Colburn is preparing, again, this year, the meetings with the subcommittee have been, I think, well, from my point of view, a great deal of fun. It's always a process that we really, really enjoy. It gets us an opportunity to talk about our priorities with people who understand them, are very sophisticated about them, and just want to thank the committee for putting in the many, many, many hours of work that they have with us on that project.
Thank you.
I worked with John Rock and Peter Brown on this subcommittee. I want to thank Dr. Rizzi and Mr. Ford, as well as the school committee. We had 2 very, very long nights, as well as I followed up several times with Dr. Rizzi in person, not to mention, many emails. I have a very large file that we'll be putting together along with the minutes up on the website so that anyone can look at any of the information. I hadn't done the schools before, so I just, jumped right in with both feet, and we verified everything. This is a $43 million budget. That's huge. That's an awesome responsibility. And I think, like everyone else, I'm just going to say it, everybody hears, oh, there's money hidden in the budget. It's such a big budget. So we really wanted to look at that and see, is there a lot of fluff? Is there a lot of extra in this budget? And surprisingly, there is not. We looked first at...
Well, quite frankly, we were looking for the pot of gold that everybody thinks is there.
Well, darn, I'm looking for it all the time myself.
We looked at the salaries. The salaries are the biggest part of this budget. I verified every single salary. I mean, we got a spreadsheet of every Unit A employees and what their salary was by department, matched it against the budget. The ones that aren't Unit A are much smaller, so you can see them right in the budget, and I looked at those percentages, and as you all know, I think from last year with the Unit A contract analysis, the teachers are on a grid, and the average step increase on that grid is 4.75%. So you can't, it's not like the town where you can look at the salary increase and you're seeing mostly 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, and the few that are different jump out at you. It's not like that. You can see anywhere from 2% to a 6 or 7% increase. So we had to look at each one individually and see if they made sense. And again, we did that. We looked at the professional development budget, because that's a big part of the budget. Mr. Ford updated the professional development plan. So we looked at that and we asked for the dollars so that we could get a handle on what goes into training. We verified that. I looked at SPED. That's another place where I've heard, oh, there's money in SPED. And I asked for the SPED placements, and we received spreadsheets with every single child, not names, but every single child in their placement. And I verified every single one of those coming into that $3 million budget. What I want to point out there is that there is no contingency in this year's budget as there has been in years past. And the reason there's no SPED contingency is because the budget is up almost 5%, which is mostly due to salaries. So they did not want to add a SPED contingency. That makes me a little nervous. On the other hand, it's a good experiment to see what happens. Should there be an issue and we get a placement that we're not planning on, then Dr. Rizzi would have to use the Chapter 70 money, which means she wouldn't prepay some of those placements.
Actually, it would be...
Circuit breaker, excuse me, thank you.
Yes.
Circuit breaker, thank you. So again, we looked at that. We looked at the new additions to the budget, as Dr. Rizzi said, and there was $421,000 worth, of which $90,000 were the school resource officers for the police. So if you take them out, you're looking at $331,000, of which only 3.25 are new positions for math. So we dug down into that. We got the MCAS scores for math historically back about 5 years. We also got the DART spreadsheets showing where student growth is lacking. And you could see by going through those numbers that there is a need at the middle, at the elementary, and the high school level to work on math scores. So, you know, we felt like there was definitely a need to improve math. The equipment, they're looking at light speed amplification systems for some elementary school classrooms, which basically amplifies the teacher's voice for not just the students that are hard of hearing that, or anybody's hard of hearing, or just anybody would hear better, as well as she mentioned, the new STEM curriculum. So again, there's only 331,000 if you don't count the resource officers in new. So we looked at admin because that was the hot potato, and we didn't shy away from the tough issues. I think everybody's heard bandied about admin 4.5%, when by contract they should only receive 2.5%. Well, I looked at the contracts, and Dr. Rizzi and Mr. Ford are the only two contracts that specify 2.5%. Every other contract does not specify 2.5%, as I was told. So the question comes down to, do they deserve the 4.5% that's in the budget for these 10 or 11 people? And the way that was explained to us is if the contracts are based on, the increases are based on merit in a year that we have 4 level 1 schools. If that's not merit, what is? So we understood that argument. I suppose we could have said, well, we'll cut Dr. Rizzi and Jonathan Ford back to 2.5%. That's $7,000 in the total budget. I just want to say that again, $7,000. And that seemed at that point, if we did that, that's a political statement, and we were not going into politics.
Well, can I actually just do a quick math? I think the 4.5% would total to $23,000. Is that correct?
For all 11 people.
That's correct.
Right.
For all, if everybody got a 4.5%. If they just got their 2.5%, the net overage there for that extra 2% would be $9,200 is what we're really talking about here.
Right, and the 7,000 I was referring to was just Dr. Rizzi and Jonathan Ford's
That's correct.
increase. That's what the 7,000 I mentioned was.
As long as we're here, can I ask one question? Sure. Dr. Rizzi, can you give us your logic for doing this? Why did you put in 4.5%?
In the proposed budget for administrative raises, well, there are lots of things that make for satisfactory working environment for people, and competitive pay is clearly one of those things. The principals do not have a union, so they do not get regular raises of any kind. They don't have a bargaining unit to negotiate for them. The only thing that they can bring to the table to prove their worth in their profession is superlative performance. And Stoughton has gotten attention. People have noticed the level 1 schools across the state. People have noticed the level 1 schools in colleges that our students apply to. Educational administrators have basically those that have proven their worth with reliable numbers and can demonstrate that they are in fact capable of educational improvement, can essentially write their own ticket anywhere. And consistency and stability in the area of leadership to move ideas forward and consistently over a period of time so that they really have a chance to take root is key to making those things work. So given that I know our administrators are very competitive in terms of what they can offer to other towns, and that it is very, very much in the interest of Stoughton and the Stoughton school system to keep them, I believe that it was important to recognize their work. Because if this isn't a time when, if this isn't enough, then what would be? And frankly, they would very reasonably think there would be absolutely nothing that they could do that could generate some kind of recognition to them financially.
The $23,000, well, certainly I don't know how anybody could make an argument that they shouldn't get 2.5%. Everybody in town's getting 2.5%. Certainly the teachers got double that, almost. You and Jonathan Ford are in at 2.5%. So when you break it out, like I said, it's only it's a $9,200 discretionary item for you. The $23,000 is 0.0005% of the $43 million budget. And I just want that to be absolutely crystal clear here. And we're mostly concerned about the 99.9995% of this budget. Actually, the 23,000 is the 9,200 is 0.0002%. Sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Coburn.
Almost done. We took another hot potato, which was Dr. Rizzi's salary, because a lot has been being said about Dr. Rizzi's salary. So we looked at historically what her salary was. And I'm sorry for talking about, like you're not here.
Oh, please do. It's what happens when you work in public service, and I'm completely used to it, and feel free, of course.
In 2010, she was budgeted for $150,000, but she took $140,000 because it was the recession and times were tight. For 2011 and 2012, she received a 0% increase both years. 2013 is the year you hear about. That was the 17% increase to $168,500, which was a $28,000 raise. And that was, again, looked at as what's the market rate for surrounding communities, which was about $170,000. In 2014, 2.5%. In 2015, 2.5%. This year, the 2016 budget, she has in there at 4.5%. So I just wanted to get out there that we did look at the whole salary. We looked at Unit B, my favorite, Unit B.
Sorry, before we move on. Are you allowed to give yourself an increase in salary? How do you get an increase in salary, Dr. Rizzi?
I don't understand. I have to propose it, and it has to be accepted in the budget.
By the school committee,
yes.
So the school committee is the only one that can vote you a raise?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Unit B, there's two things about Unit B. There are the 3 positions from last year's budget that we put in the budget, then we took away. Then they said we'll hire them. After the school committee lifted the freeze, we gave the money back. They are still not hired. They're being impact bargained by the STA. We still don't have all of the executive minutes related to that, so we're not quite clear what's going on there. We did leave the positions in the budget because the administration still feels that those are very needed positions. I was hesitant because I'd like to see them hired, but I also didn't want to take the money away so that if it got to a point they could be hired, they couldn't. So then we looked at Unit B, and I'm not sure if you're all aware, but the Unit B had a Me Too clause. So after the Unit A got their 4.5% steps plus COLA plus bump to the top step, Unit B said, hey, what about us? So that was renegotiated for basically, they were on a grid similar to the town grid at 2.5% steps, but now in addition to that, the school committee gave them a 1% COLA, and that's retroactive. I don't know the total cost of that contract. I don't have everything I need yet. But the bottom line is most of that will be paid out in 15 anyway. It will have to be absorbed from the budget. So what we're looking at for 2016 is probably a 1% on the 1 mil, so maybe $10,000. So I wasn't concerned about it for 2016. We did not give them extra money for that. They'll have to absorb it. But I do still want to work at the numbers because I, for my own sake, want to know when we approve a contract in this town, do we know what it truly costs? So bottom line is this is where we stand. If you look at the school budget, the one with the highlighted yellow, do you all have that one? To look at the big view, you see that the schools went up $2,010,585 this year. Of that, 1.4 million is instruction. Do you see that 2,000 instruction? So that's the biggest chunk of the increase. So I asked to have that broken out. That 1.5 million, 1.2 million of that is salary. So I'm just going to repeat that again. 1.2 million of the total $2 million increase is salary. The additional 337,000 instructional, that's again the STEM that we talked about in the audio equipment. So when you're looking at salaries of 1.2 million of your increase, what do you do? We felt as a subcommittee, and correct me, John, if I'm wrong, we approved it minus the 90,000 for the police officers because we wanted those back in police, again, to keep the cost of police in one place, and as Barbara mentioned, their committee added it to police. But we did approve the budget except for the 90,000 as is, and we felt that we had serious reservations. We know this is not sustainable. We know that that increase is not sustainable. We know that a 5% increase to the school budget is not sustainable. What do we do about it, though? And that was our quandary. They are fairly lean with the exception of the salaries. We could have said, okay, you can't have the 3 math teachers. Again, all those new only come to $331,000. So it is a bottom line budget. Even if we said we will cut X amount of dollars, it's up to the schools how to spend it. we can't direct them to lay off teachers, but we believe that day is coming, and the question is, when will it come? We didn't feel it was this year because the revenue technically is there to support it.
Actually, it's
However,
not.
as Rick has said, we used $6 million of free cash to make these budgets, so one could argue that the revenue isn't there to support it. So bottom line is we approved it with serious, serious reservation. We know we can't keep going this way, but the question is, do we direct to lay off teachers? Can we direct to lay off teachers?
No.
That's
But it's just going to get worse next year and more worse. Sorry about that.
Worser.
The year after. This year, we had the luxury of having $6 million in free cash. It's gone. We chewed up so far $1.25 million in the snow overdraft, and bills are still coming in. We don't know how we're going to sustain this. So you'll be presenting a budget with the contractual raises in it, and that number is not going to be able to be supported. We just don't know where the money's going to come from. Yes, there's going to be some new growth, hopefully, and there's going to be other things, but we're not going to have $6 million in free cash. So that's our dilemma this year. We're trying to figure out how to put money in the stabilization fund. We're trying to find money to pay cash for articles and things of that nature, and we've got a huge amount of work to do.
If I may say, I want to thank you for all of the work that you did on this. It is a very complicated budget. This has been many, many, many hours. All of the things that you say, and in spite of that, I know the subcommittee has voted for the budget. This year, the town can afford the budget. Things change. Next year, there might be some new source of revenue that we have no idea. Every year has to be looked at as its discrete year. And every year that we can provide what our students need is another year that the students get what they need. None of us anticipated what was going to happen in 2009. And when it happened, we coped with it. And we managed to find creative ways to keep the system intact and to keep going until we could get an upward cycle. And the history is that there are always downward cycles or times when money is tight. And when that happens and we have to cut, we cut. And we cut in the best and most creative ways that we can that keep the system intact. And if it becomes necessary to do that again, then we will do that again. And everyone in the administration is very aware that there will not be the money to support this kind of increase every year, and that it will not be reasonable for us to ask for it when the town is paying for a major building project, which is also essential for the long-term stability of both the school system and the town of Stoughton. So everything that we get this year that we can keep in place for one more year is one more year of superlative education, and when the time comes that we have to cut, and even with the natural cycles of the economy, eventually that will happen. And we will deal with that when the time comes, and we will deal with it in as responsible a way as we possibly can. And I think we have a track record in that regard as well. So thank you very much for making the recommendation that you have in spite of your reservations, which I completely understand.
And I just want to make just one last comment, and I do want to commend you. You were very creative in dealing with the budget cuts without having it impact teachers. And as a parent, I applaud you for that. I hope you can do that magic again, should it be needed. I don't know that you can, but I appreciate it. So that's it for the subcommittee. John, did I?
I just want to say that I personally think the school department, the school committee, the teachers, everybody involved are doing a great job. The school system is vitally important to a town, and you guys are a real credit to our town. And just to back up what Pat and Rick said, what she said, you're not the only one department that's asked for an increase over 2.5%. At some point, all departments are going to have to kind of own up to that or be level funded or something like that. So, take some work, but you're not the only one. I mean,
right.
You are the biggest budget, but you're not the only one that's asked for an increase above 2.5%. And I think we mentioned in the subcommittee that maybe we should take a look at the transportation.
Yes.
And think about whether it's viable to, I don't know, buy our own buses and provide our own transportation as opposed to what we pay an outside vendor. But other than that, I was really satisfied with the way you built your budget. I think you did a good job, and thank you.
And we will continue to look at everything with completely fresh eyes. That's something that Mr. Harding and I will do an analysis on. Maybe it's a way to go, maybe it isn't. But every single, there can't be a stone left unturned, and we will make sure. And we know that this kind of increases, the day will come very soon when that's not going to be available. But that day isn't today, and we will do our absolute best with every dollar in the meantime.
So I just want to add that I appreciate the work that the subcommittee did. They're extremely thorough. I appreciate the transparency that the schools make available to us. It's just it gets better every year. I recall the years when we first got here where we're told it was a bottom line budget and voted up or down. So, and we had people on town meeting floor saying, okay, let's cut the budget 5%. So we've well moved past that, and the relationship and the collaboration that occurs between the entire town is impressive. It was disturbing to see that there's misinformation being put out there about certain elements of the budget, and it was important for us to clarify. And specifically in regards to your salary, that in your first year, you actually took a negative $10,000 increase. No increases for the following 2 years. In the fourth year, you finally get an increase, and as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't $28,000, it was $18,000, and that's a 3.2% over that 4-year period. And you have 2.5% going forward. So the much to-do that's been put out there about this one raise for 1 year without context of knowing that there were none for 3 years prior is disturbing. The other piece of that is that to think that you can put your own raise in and give it to you is also misinformation that should have been shared, that only the school committee can give you a raise, and you have a contract, and as does Jonathan Ford. So it's important that that's clarified for anybody that might have a question on that. Questions from the committee? Dr. Camacho.
And I thank you for the presentation tonight, Dr. Rizzi. Very clear, very understandable. I just want to go back in time, but just bear with me for a minute.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Roberta, could you speak up a little bit?
Just bear with me for a minute about going back in time.
Yep.
I remember coming to this room, sitting in a circle, perhaps 3 years ago, and Mr. Hartman and Mr. Kelly were here. We had a presentation regarding, well, 2 years ago. All right. The presentation had to do with the fact that we were going to try and limit the increases in salaries to 2.5%, that we were coming together as a town, school department, town side, 1 Pearl Street with 232 Pearl Street, and we were going to hold hands, put a lot of joint services in place, and try and keep that at 2.5%. I don't know where something happened at 232 Pearl Street, because I think it's probably the members of the school committee that make the final decision on contracts. They have to be. But it seems to me that there's something very wrong when 1 Pearl Street seems to be pretty much holding the line on salaries, and 232 Pearl Street has not done that. So therefore, we face in the future, the next 2 years, and the families and the children may face layoffs of teachers, cutting backs of programs, etc. I don't know if that will happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But what bothers me is the fact that we all sat here and bobbed our heads. Yes, oh yes, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. And then things all fell apart. And I'm not going to go into any political statements or anything like that, but I do remember that meeting, and I do remember the presentation that it was done with on a screen with a projector, if I'm not mistaken. It was very clearly done. And I don't know where things go wrong, why we put the town on a certain path and we said that is sustainable. And now we hear tonight that because of contracts that have been signed, this may no longer be sustainable. Meanwhile, we have the building projects, we have the unfunded liabilities, two different types of unfunded liabilities that are in millions and millions of dollars that have to be dealt with eventually down the road. It is not sustainable. So that's what I wanted to relate tonight. Maybe I was the only person at that meeting on that Saturday morning.
You were not.
I don't know where did that we're coming together go. It went someplace. I don't know where it went. So at any rate, that's what I have to say, and I wish that the coming together and the sticking together on the 2.5 had been kept at both ends of Pearl Street. And it has nothing to do with Dr. Rizzi's administrative capabilities. It has to do more with the people that sign contracts. Thank you.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Ed, and then Bob. Should I go alphabetically?
Just have a few questions. What's the total enrollment for 16, 15, and 14, Ben, roughly, number of students?
Approximately 3,900.
Is that going up or down, or in the last few years?
It's been pretty stable.
Pretty stable?
We were going down about 10 to 50 students a year for a few years, and then last year we had a bump up of about 75. So I think it's essentially stable.
Okay, and the positions that were voted last year, have those been filled yet, or in process, or what is the status of those?
I very much regret to say that they are not yet filled. We are working as hard as we can with the STA to go forward and get them filled. It is the right of the union to impact bargain the positions, and for that has taken longer than I personally would have liked. It will, in the end, happen.
Okay, and special ed.
Yes, sir.
On your spreadsheet here on the back, some of these numbers are moving around quite a bit. Is it like a plus-minus thing, or do you anticipate, like that one, the collaborative, up $700,000? Is that, yes, two of them went down, that one went up a lot.
If you could tell me what page of the budget?
Well,
then
I
we
got
can
the
look at
old,
same
the back,
lines.
I got the back page of your spreadsheet, number 16, page 16.
16. Okay.
The last section.
Well, some of the, so those are the different types of schools that students are placed in. So you will sometimes see enrollments go down in the area of collaborative placements, maybe go up in the area of a private school, or vice versa. And it has to do with when students age out. So if we happen to have a year where 3 or 4 students graduate, then you'll see they'll drop, that number will drop, but then perhaps we'll have new placements into different kinds of schools, or students who are in special ed until the age of 22, their 22nd birthday. If we have a number of people age out of a certain kind of program, so it's somewhat related to the students who are coming and going, and so it's unpredictable and different in different years.
Is a $300,000 increase, is that normal, or is there like
No.
a range it's been? Or?
It is absolutely not normal, and I hope that it does not become the new normal. And that number is based on particularly 2 things. Some very, very expensive move-in placements. So if a family moves into Stoughton and they have a child placed in, say, and I'm just going to use this as an example because I know how much it costs, Perkins School for the Blind. Perkins School for the Blind for residential students is $250,000 a year. So if a family moves into Stoughton and their child is already placed there, and this is not just true for Stoughton, but for any town, the town then takes on the responsibility of the cost of that placement. We have had, I believe, 3 move-ins this year where the total cost of the tuitions is over $190,000. That's one thing. The other thing, which is slightly troubling, is that in the last 3 years, this year, last year, and the previous spring, we have seen a number of very, very troubled 5, 6, and 7-year-olds who have needed very, very particular attention, particularly around behavior. So we saw a spike in placements for quite young children. So the move-ins can be any year, and we can go years without such a thing. So this is a very significant increase, and I hope this is not the kind of increase that we continue to see in the future. It is most certainly not our average.
Thank you.
Mr. Desmond? Okay.
Can I just clarify, Dr. Rizzi, only the 3 Unit Bs haven't been filled. Weren't the rest of the, didn't we add other new positions that were filled?
Everything else was filled. Only the 3 Unit B positions, the 2 new curriculum coordinators, and the Dean of Discipline.
Thank you.
All of the other positions that were in the budget have been filled. We always fill the positions, except this was a very extraordinary circumstance around these 3. We don't leave positions unfilled, nor do I, and this is my personal commitment to you, unless there would be some kind of an emergency, I would never, ever create a position once the budget was made. You will see the same number of positions at the end of the year as you saw in the budget proposal.
Any other questions? Let me close by congratulating you on achieving 4 level 1 schools. I guess we've got 5 now, right? Southeast. Robin.
Right, yeah.
And the 2 level 2 schools. An awesome achievement. Long-term planning, base hits every year. It was never a home run put in place to try and achieve that, so it was a reach into the future, and I'm glad we're at the outer perimeter of that. So please extend our congratulations and thanks.
Thank you. May I please answer a question that Mr. Mitchell asked me the last time I was here that's not
Please.
related to the budget? Mr. Mitchell, the last time the West School windows were replaced was 1987 or 88.
1901?
87 or 88.
Okay, thank you.
All right. With that, you should have been, this should be at least your first, if not second or third, printed an electronic copy of the special town meeting warrant that we have on our agenda for next Wednesday. Monday's agenda has a few items, continuations for the most part. So please take a look at that. We'll be voting on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. We're hoping to get a draft version of the budget together tomorrow and distribute it over the weekend for folks and discuss it. So, Mr. Tronfio?
I just think the school department needs to be aware of, based on the salaries for next year at the 31, if you had 5%, that's $1.6 million increase. The whole town at 58 million assessment at 2.5 is 1.4. So the whole increase eats up the whole town 2.5 in 1 year. And that doesn't include anything else. So this definitely is an unsustainable trend that this is on, and how they're going to go about dealing with it, I'm not sure, but needs to be considered for the future. Thank you.
No, it's the observation that we've made as well. So it is a problem, and we really have to figure out how we're going to solve this without degrading the level of achievement and education that we've achieved in this school system moving forward. Okay, Mr. Mitchell?
Are we going to be voting on the budget or the articles Monday? Do you know which you're going to start at first?
We're going to start on the articles.
The articles
Yeah,
first.
we have most information about that. Give us an extra day or two to get the budget together. We've blocked Thursday in case we need to roll into another day of voting for the budget. So, but yeah, that's what we'll be prepared to do. Okay? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Bruce? I'm sorry? No, Monday. Yep. So I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Joe, in my sight line. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, and we'll see you on Monday.